But the Bible not only predicts the regathering of the Jews to their homeland as a sign of the end times, but it also predicts her isolation from others and the increase of anti-Semitism, which is up 900% around the world. So much of this has accelerated after October 7th. You would have thought after that horrible massacre of innocent Jewish people that there'd be an outrage and people would rise up in favor of their Jewish friends and the nation Israel. And in some ways the opposite has happened, because the people are saying, oh, we're more against Israel than ever. And this Jew hatred is on the rise. But this too is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. God says Israel in the last days would be scattered. That's happened. God said they would be regathered. That too has happened. God said Israel will be regaining Jerusalem and be isolated ultimately. And ultimately that she would be attacked. Now that has happened, but not on the scale it's going to happen. Because the Bible speaks of a large nation from the north of Israel that will attack her. And that nation is called Magog. Now, who is Magog? Many experts believe it's modern day Russia. I happen to agree with that for the most part. I don't think anyone can say with certainty, but I think it's very possible. But we know this, there's allies that march with Magog, and one of those allies is called Persia. And Persia was the name of Iran until they changed it in 1935. In other words, God is saying there would be an alliance between Magog and Persia, or maybe Russia and Iran. And so they attack Israel, but when this happens, and it hasn't happened yet, God is going to step in and intervene on behalf of his people. Ezekiel 38 says, when this happens, when Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord. And his judgment comes upon Magog and her allies, and God pours his spirit out on Israel again. Christ descends from heaven, and we are caught up to meet him, to receive our new resurrection bodies, and we're reunited with loved ones who have died in faith, who have preceded us. Now, some would push back, well, the word rapture is not in the Bible. Well, the word Bible isn't in the Bible. The word Trinity isn't in the Bible. And in fact, the word rapture is in the Bible if you happen to have a Latin translation. Because rapture, from the root word rapturus, is simply a translation of the Greek word harpazo, which is used 13 times in the New Testament. So don't get hung up on the word rapture, but the harpazo, the great escape, if you will, the catching up of believers to see the Lord in the air, is spoken of many times in the Bible. It means to take forcibly, to snatch, or to catch up. Some would say, no, the rapture is a modern invention popularized by J.N. Darby in his dispensational teaching in the 19th century. Well, no question, J.N. Darby helped popularize the teaching of the rapture, but this teaching preceded him, going back to the apostles. We're reading about what Paul has said about it. In a moment, we'll read another verse where he addresses it as well. James talked about it. Peter talked about it. John talked about it. And most importantly, Jesus talked about it. And we already quoted what he said in John 14 when he said, I will come again and receive you unto myself. That where I am, you may be also. There's sort of an Old Testament prototype of the rapture. Remember the story of Enoch? It says Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him, or literally translated him. Enoch sort of had a solo rapture. So he would walk with the Lord all the time, and they were taking one of their walks one day. Maybe the Lord said, buddy, we're closer to my house than yours. Why don't you come home with me today? But he was just caught up to meet the Lord in the air. And that also happened to Elijah, who was caught up, remember, to a chariot of fire. But early church fathers spoke of it as well. Irenaeus spoke about it in the 2nd century. Cyprian of Carthage spoke of it in the 3rd century. So this is not a new teaching invented by J.N. Darby. It's a biblical teaching that goes back to the apostles and Christ himself. And I think it's important to talk about it. Closing, what does this mean to us? How should this affect us? If you are a Christian, you should be spiritually awake and alert. I love what Paul says in Romans 13:11. This is all the more urgent, for you know how late it is. Time is running out. Wake up, for our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. Now Paul tells us what to do. So remove your dark deeds like dirty clothes and put on the shining armor of right living, for we belong to the day. So let us live decent lives for all to see. Don't participate in wild parties and drunkenness, in sexual promiscuity, and immoral living, or in quarreling or in jealousy. Instead, clothe yourselves with the presence of Christ. I like how the J.B. Phillips translation puts this final part when he says, let us be Christ's men from head to foot and give no chances for the flesh to have its fling. Be a godly man. Be a godly woman. Jesus is coming. Let this comfort you. Let this motivate you. Let this wake you up. But one final thought. If you're not a Christian, this is kind of scary, because some are going to be taken and others are going to be left. Jesus said 2 will be in a field, 1 will be taken and the other left. 2 will be in a bed, 1 will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord will come. There will be people that will be left behind, and you will face the tribulation period, and it ain't going to be pretty, I can tell you that. That's why you want to be right with God and ready to meet the Lord. You say, well, how do I do that? You ask Christ to come into your life.